You've probably spent a lot of time reading about poker, studying, and trying to improve as a player. Unfortunately, much of the information out there is just the same old recycled tips that are regurgitated by teachers and strategy sites over and over again. Well, today let's think a bit outside of the box and talk about some things that you may not have thought of that can hopefully help you improve your game more quickly. Number one, specialize in a game, but play other games as well. I have found that other poker games have made me a much more well-rounded player and given me perspectives that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise. For example, I learned to play PLO a couple of years ago and found that some of the concepts really made me think a lot about what I was doing in No Limit Hold'em, or what I wasn't doing right in No Limit Hold'em. For example, the concept of polarized versus smooth equity distributions was kind of an aha moment for me. It helped me completely overhaul and reconfigure my opening and flatting ranges to fit different situations better. And if you don't know what smooth versus polarized equity distributions means, all it really means is hands that either flop a ton of equity, or hands that generally don't flop huge hands but have decent equity versus post-flop ranges. A good example of a polarized hand is deuces. If you flop a set, you generally are going to have a high amount of equity. But if you miss, your hand has little playability. On the other hand, something like Jack-10 suited will seldom completely miss a flop and gives a lot of opportunities for improvement, backdoor equity and just overall general playability. So break out of your comfort zone, spend some time learning a different game. It doesn't have to be all of, you don't have to take a break from your current game, but just take a few hours a week, learn a new game, read just a strategy guide on another game. Just find the ultimate PLO beginner strategy guide or whatever and read it, and it might open your eyes to a few things you might be missing in your No Limit Hold'em strategy. And I'm not just talking about games like PLO. I mean, play some tournaments, play some sit and goes, even if it's in the same type of game. You'll be exposed to a bunch of different stack sizes, a bunch of different SPRs, and all kinds of different things that you just don't normally see if you're only playing deep stacked, No Limit Hold'em or whatever. Number two, play against Old Man EV. This is a Bobby Jones analogy, the golfer from like almost 100 years ago. When he played a golf tournament, he never played against the other players. This is what he said. He only played against Old Man Par. In other words, he wasn't worried about what everybody else was doing because he couldn't control that. All he could control is what was in front of him and what he was doing when he was whacking his ball all over the golf course. The same thing can work in poker. Stop worrying about what everybody else is doing. Only worry about your decisions. And on every decision, think about every possible angle to squeeze the most profit possible out of it. Instead of immediately going for the standard player bet sizing, be creative. I've found that using a solver can really help you develop this skill. So basically what I'm saying with this is develop your own best game. Use solvers to fit your game, your playing style. Find the bet sizings, the methodology, whatever, to fit your style of play. Everybody has their own personality. You don't have to mimic everybody else and become a clone. You can find your own style and make it work, and using a solver can actually help you find the correct sizings to fit whatever situations you happen to get yourself into. For example, if you're one of these aggressive players that likes to do wide 3-bets, you can use solvers to find out what's the best ranges you should use versus certain players, what sizing should you use with your 3-bets. Instead of just reading a guide or doing what this teacher says, it might not work in the games. I mean, your player pool that you're playing in could be completely different to wherever they develop their strategy in. So think outside the box, focus on your own game, and it will pay dividends. Number three, keep tight players to your left. Now, I know everybody already knows this, right? You don't want aggressive people 3-betting you and playing back at you to your left. and you generally know that you want to be able to steal wide, so you want tight players to your left. But what you probably aren't doing is building your entire table selection around tight players. Now, this is especially good for you guys that don't play in a player pool that has a ton of fish anymore. I mean, today's games just don't have as many fish as there were 10 years ago. It's just an unfortunate fact of the game. So instead of wasting your time or spending a ton of time table selecting and trying to hunt down the fish, instead, just try to hunt down the tight players, because there are a lot of tight players still out there. A lot of people playing these 16, 14 styles for 6 max or 12 10s or whatever. If you can just identify all of the nits in your player pool and label them accordingly, when you go to sit down at tables, if you just have those players directly to your left, I've found that everything else just tends to take care of itself, because you'll have the loose players on your right, you'll have the fish on your right or to your left, 2 seats to your left or further. You'll have a lot easier decisions, which, as you know, blind versus blind situations are really common, and it's just so much easier to play with a tight player directly to your left. He's going to fold to your steals. It's almost like you're free rolling the table, right? So for the next few sessions, instead of focusing on all the other players or the fish, focus on who the nits are, label them, and if you don't have a nit directly to your left, find another table. If you play sessions where you only have a nit directly to your left on all of your tables, see what happens, and then you can thank me afterwards. Number 4, stop focusing on how to beat the regs. Now, we kind of just talked about this a second ago when we were talking about table selection. Well, beyond table selection, once you get on a table and you got on that table for a specific reason, it's very easy to get off track and start focusing on how to beat the regs and forgetting about the whole reason you're on that table in the first place. If you're focusing on how to beat the regs too much, you're probably missing out on the easiest path to a better win rate. When I play, I see regs more as trees that are just in my way as I chase donkeys through the forest. I know that's a weird analogy, but it's true. If you keep running into trees and are trying to figure out the best way to chop them down, wouldn't you be better off just avoiding them altogether? Save your mental energy for putting yourself in profitable spots against the fish and the tight players, as we already talked about. Isolate them, make plans for when they are in the blinds, adjust everything to squeeze as much profit from the exploitable players while only trying to equalize against the regs, and you will be much better off. Basically, table select, table select, table select. But once you're on the table, focus your energies on the soft spot, and I don't mean you have to completely avoid the regs, but you can at least just avoid playing to their strengths. Find their weaknesses, make a note of them, and play to your strengths and their weaknesses. If a reg is unbalanced toward folding too much to steals, have them on your left. If they are opening too wide and folding to 3-bets too much, make sure they're on your right. Or just keep that in mind and have these notes handy in front of you as you play, but otherwise hone in on the fish and the other players that have huge leaks and just squeeze the profit out of them. Number 5, do a pre-game warm-up. I know this sounds crazy and you're probably thinking of like playing basketball or football or whatever, where you have to have a warm-up like before you work out. But it can work for you too as a poker player. I have been notorious for playing bad the first few minutes of my sessions. I noticed a trend. My graph seems to always shoot downward for the first 15 minutes or so before it begins its steady climb upwards. If this rings true to you, which I know it will with a lot of you, a pregame warm-up can really help you. I mean, I used to say, man, if I could just cut out the first 15 minutes of my sessions and just start at like minute 15 or 20, I'd double my win rate. Well, I think a lot of my problem was that poker takes a different part of your brain than everyday life. It's hard to go from a loving dad or loving husband or boyfriend to a cutthroat son of a gun instantly. It's hard to just flip that switch, right? So it helps to psych yourself up before you play. Your routine might differ, but let's just say you like to work out and you are a person that exercises. So before you play poker, you might flip your mindset by doing 20 push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, whatever's good for you, and get your adrenaline flowing, psych yourself up, smack yourself in the face, whatever it takes. Or you can use verbal cues, right? You could stand in front of the mirror and tell yourself, I am the greatest player in the world. How dare anybody try to step into this arena with me? I pity the fool, like Mr. T or whatever. Try a few different things, see what gets you in the best mindset, then just do it right before you play every single time. Have that 2-minute, 5-minute, whatever the warm-up period is. Just do it. And you'll probably find that you're able to think more efficiently right off the bat when you start your sessions, and thus make better decisions and have a lot less spots where you're bleeding money. Number 6, stop spending so much time analyzing the so-called tough spots in your sessions. Usually tough spots are also close spots, which means they are often neutral EV. Now, I'm not telling you not to analyze these situations at all. Just make sure you don't spend all of your time on them. Instead, take a look at more common and standard spots to see if you can do better in those situations. You might find that there is a lot more room for increasing your win rate if you take a look at every part of your game and tidy up and even modernize all of your standard lines that you may have been using for years. Thought processes have to evolve in order for you to keep up with the modern game, right? So you might need a slightly bigger bet here or a slightly smaller bet there, and it could make a huge difference to your bottom line. Always ask questions like, could a smaller bluff accomplish the same thing here? Or would the same part of his range continue to a slightly bigger bet sizing? Once again, use a solver. Run through all of these spots. I would actually just recommend that you go through a complete game overhaul. Look at every single situation. Look at your under the gun ranges. Look at your flop play. Look at your c-bet strategy versus every different player type. And just modify your vacuum ranges and your vacuum lines. And then you'll find that you're starting to adjust a lot better. Now, the next one that can also help you with this as well for getting out of and breaking out of that cookie cutter mold that you've kind of maybe put yourself in, right? So number 7, practice playing without a HUD. Okay, so this won't apply to some of you who play on sites like Global Poker or Bovada and don't use a HUD. Now, while you can use a HUD on Bovada or whatever, it's still just a session stat HUD. But even if you're just using that session stat HUD, go ahead and just turn it off, right? And just practice without a HUD. Getting too focused on the stats of your opponents can help numb you to just playing good quality old-fashioned poker, right? A lot of your decisions are best made by looking at board textures, bet sizings, and even the timing of what our opponents do. A HUD really should only come into play in planning and helping us with those on-the-fence decisions. So I recommend that you play at least one session a week with no HUD. Try to make reads and take notes on players based on what they're doing and showing up with. It will make you a much more complete player and help you start seeing things you would have completely missed if you had had HUD tunnel vision still. Now, I hope these tips help you start to think a bit more out of the box when it comes to improving as a player. If you are a cash game player who wants to try something a bit different, I have created courses that help players build or overhaul their game. I have quickly turned losing and break-even players into winners, and winners into even bigger winners. Click the link above or check the description below to learn more about it. Now get out there and stop being a faceless clone, build some personality into your game, and start crushing. Thanks for watching.